Today, we'll be going over every deck in FullMetal Alchemist for Union Arena. So let's say you go to your local game store, your LGS, and you pick up 2 starter decks for FullMetal Alchemist because this video told you to do so. So what can you build with that? Not necessarily a very good deck, but hey, what do you expect from 2 starter decks? So this is a deck that you can build with just 2 starter decks. It's definitely not the best, but it's great if you're a newcomer to the game and you want to start out and just play some games. So what is the point of buying 2 starter decks? Well, there are SRs in the starter decks that you cannot get in the booster packs. So for example, this Alphonse Eric, 3 energy, 1 action point, says, when played, if this character is played with one of your abilities, draw a card. Also activate main, place 2 cards from your hand into the sideline. Once per turn, switch this character to active. It gains 500 BP until the end of the turn. So it starts at 3,500 BP and it goes up to 4,000. It also has an active trigger. Notably in the starter deck, you have very limited options to trigger the when played ability to draw a card. So the only card in the starter deck that allows you to do so is the event card, the 2 cost 1 action point Let's Go Home, that says add up to 1 Edward or Alphonse card from your sideline to your hand, play up to 1 Edward or Alphonse card with fulfilled required energy, and 1 AP cost from your hand set to resting onto your field or perform raid with it. So if you use the event card to play your Alphonse, you will effectively fulfill its condition and you can draw 1 card. Another SR that you can only get in the starter deck is the 4 cost 1 action point Edward Elric. That is a raid card that inherently has impact 1, but notably only when raided. And it says when played, you may perform, look at the top 6 cards of your hand, reveal up to 1 character or side card among them, and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. If you do, place 1 base card of this rated character into your sideline. This character will no longer be rated. So basically, if you use a second effect to remove the card underneath, it will lose its impact. The card will remain active because the mechanics of raid will turn it active, and even though it loses the card underneath, it will maintain the state in which it was in prior to losing its raid status. So this card also has 4,000 BP. So let's say you want to buy some booster packs, what can you build? So this is the full Brothers deck that you can build with the starter deck and the booster packs. So what are you looking for in the booster packs? You're looking for the 4 cost 1 action point Edward that says raid. During your turn, this character gains 500 BP. When played, choose up to 1 of the following, draw 2 cards, then place 1 card from your hand into the sideline. Or you can choose, if it is your turn, you may play 1 Alphonse card with 3 or less required energy and 1 AP cost from your sideline set to resting onto your field. If you do, place 1 base card of this rated card into your sideline. This character will no longer be rated. So effectively, when this card is rated, it will go up from 3,500 BP to 4,000. But if you lose the rated status, if it was rated this turn, it will remain active, but it will go down to 3,500 BP, which will probably not get over most cards. So the main card you want to be reviving back with the Edward is the 4 cost 1 action point Alphonse that says if in the sideline, if Gateway of Truth is on your field, reduce this card's required energy by 1 while in your sideline. So effectively bringing it down to 3 energy. This card also has inherently nullify impact. It also says when played, you may pay 1 AP. If you do, choose one of the abilities listed below. If this character is played with one of your abilities, choose all instead. If you revive it with Edward, you can choose both abilities, and those are choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting, and switch this character to active. So effectively, you'll be able to get 1 attack through even if your opponent's board is full using Alphonse. Notably, if you choose all of the abilities, you have to use them in the order of which they are listed in the card, resting effect first, and then switching this character to active. So the next card is the Gateway of Truth, which is a 3 cost 1 action point card that says this site cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. So effectively, by all accounts, this card cannot be destroyed. It also says when played, if Edward or Alphonse is on your field, draw 2 cards, then place 2 cards from your hand into the sideline. So it nets you 0 cards, but it sets up your sideline to be able to use your revive synergies. It also says activate main, switch to resting, place 1 card from your life area into your sideline. If you do, look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 character card among them and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So note, the ruling says that if you place a card into your sideline with the ability, you do not perform a trigger check. So usually you wouldn't use this card's second effect unless you're really digging for a specific card to get out of a tricky scenario. So overall, the combo would be using your Edward to basically bring back an Alphonse from the grave. Because the Alphonse was played with the Edward, you can use its ability. So for instance, this one allows you to draw 1 card. Or for instance, if you bring back the 4 cost Alphonse, which would be 3 cost if Gateway is on your field, and this allows you to use both abilities listed on the card when played by Edward. So notably, 1 card that helps you really synergize with the deck is the 1 cost Alphonse 1 action point that says activate main, switch to resting, sideline discard, place 1 Edward card without raid from your sideline face up under a non-rated Edward with raid on your front line. If you do, switch that character to active. it becomes raided. So basically this allows all your Edwards that have used their abilities, which will unraid them, which will allow them to get the card back underneath to become raided again. So your 4-cost Edward will be able to gain 500 BP, bringing it up to 4000 BP, and this 4-cost Edward to be able to gain its Impact 1 ability back. Notably, the event card that we just saw, the Let's Go Home for 2 energy, allows you to play any of your Alphonses to be able to use their abilities when played, because the character would have been played with one of your other abilities. So this would allow your 3-cost Alphonse to get its effect, and also the 4-cost Alphonse to get its effect also. Another deck in the yellow color is the Xing yellow deck. So we'll be going over the key cards of this deck. So the main boss monster of the deck is a 6-cost 1 action point Greed that says Raid. This character gains 1000 BP. When played, this character gains, your opponent must block this character's attack if able until the end of the turn. Also says when sideline, you may place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. If you do, place up to 1 Ling Yao card with 4 or less required energy and 1 AP cost from your sideline set to resting onto your field. So it's a card that effectively forces your opponent to trade, and you will be able to gain some card advantage by doing so. And for the second ability, the ruling is that you can play the base card of this rated character when this sideline effect activates. So we'll be looking at the card that you will likely be bringing back with Greed. It would be the 4-cost 1 action point Ling Yao that says this character gains all abilities listed below if you have the required amount of energy generation. So if you have 6 or more, it says when play, draw up to 1 card. 7 or more, when attacking, choose up to 1 other Xing affinity card on your field. It gains this character cannot be blocked by a character with 4000 or more BP until the end of the turn. And this is also a color trigger with 4000 BP. So basically the small combo is that if you raid with the 6-cost Greed onto the Ling Yao, and if the Greed dies, you can bring back the Ling Yao from the sideline, and because it is considered when played with the effect of Greed, you can draw 1 card if you have 6 or more energy on your field. The next card we'll be looking at is the 5-cost 2 action point Scar that says play this character set to active onto your field. It says when played, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. If you have 7 or more energy generation, this character gains 1000 BP and Impact 1 until the end of the turn. It also says when attacking, your opponent places 2 cards from their sideline on the bottom of your deck in any order. It's a very interesting effect that allows you to counter opposing strategies that uses their sideline as a resource. There's an interesting ruling that says if your opponent places cards onto the bottom of the deck, due to the ability of Scar, they actually have to reveal the order of the cards that they placed onto the bottom of their deck. Another interesting pair in this deck is the 3-cost 1 action point Mei Chang. That is a raid card that is more of a utility raid card because she should usually be played onto the energy line, because she says raid, this character gains 1 energy generation, so bringing it up from 2 to 3, and it also says when played, if on the energy line, draw a card. So a neat little combo to allow you to get to that 7 energy generation that you really need to be able to use your cards to their max potential. Another card that we have is the 2-cost Lanfan. That is a Xing card that says this character gains all abilities listed below if you have the required amount of energy generation. So for 5 or more, this character gains 500 BP, bringing it up from 3000 to 3500. And for 6 or more, this character cannot be blocked by a character with 4000 or more BP. So effectively, you'll be able to sideline any opposing character if they choose to block. And at 7 or more, when played, you may pay 1 AP. If you do, switch this character to active. So a neat little card to push for damage or to force your opponent to block, netting you card advantage. The next deck that we have is the Briggs blue deck, a very interesting deck that uses 2 AP cards to really push the advantage. The main card of this deck is the 6-cost 1 action point Olivier Mira Armstrong that says when played, switch all Briggs affinity cards on your field to active, and when attacking, you may place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. If you do, choose up to 1 character on your field with 2 or more base AP cost and switch it to active. And this card has 4000 BP. So the main card that wants to synergize with the previous card is the 4-cost 2 action point Buccaneer, which is a Briggs card that says if you have 3 or more Briggs affinity cards on your field, reduce this card's AP cost by 1 while in your hand. So bringing it down from 2 to 1 AP. It also says activate main once per turn. This character gains 1000 BP. So it brings it up from 4000 to 5000. It also gains Impact 1. And at the end of your opponent's attack phase, sideline this card, then draw a card until the start of your next turn. So effectively, it's a pretty strong card that will sideline it at the start of your next turn. So you should likely use this card to block on your opponent's turn, even if it would be sidelined. So another 2 action point card is the 5-cost Alex Louis Armstrong. that does not have a trait, but has inherently damage too. The card also says once per turn, when this character attacks and wins a battle, draw 2 cards. It has an active trigger, and it has a very impressive 4500 BP that will be able to block any opposing 4000 BP during your opponent's turn. So another important card of the deck is the 3-cost 2-action point Fort Briggs, which is also a Briggs card. And this card says when played, reduce the AP cost of the next Briggs affinity card you use from your hand this turn by 1. It also says activate main, switch to resting. You can only activate this ability if a card with 2 or more base AP costs has been played onto your field this turn. Draw a card. You can only activate this Fort Briggs ability 1 time each turn. The hard once per turn clause refers to the second ability of this card, not the first one. So the overall combo of the deck is to use the Fort Briggs first, which allows you to reduce the AP cost of the next Briggs affinity card you play. So for example, if you play the 3-cost, she effectively costs no action points. And this card is fairly synergistic because it says when played, if a card with 2 or more base AP cost has been played onto your field this turn, choose up to 1 of your AP cards and switch it to active. You can only activate this ability 1 time each turn. So basically, if you use the Fort Briggs, you would have used 2 action points, but this refunds 1. So at this point, you only have 1 used action point after playing these 2 cards. And thus, you can play the Buccaneer, which would cost 1 action point because you likely would have 3 or more Briggs affinity cards on your field. And then on top of the that you played already, you would play the Raid 6 cost, and this will switch all Briggs affinity cards on your field to active, bringing your Buccaneer to active, and you'll be able to use its powerful ability to gain impact and 1000 BP to be able to push the tempo of the game. And notably, if you have Louis Armstrong, you can use the when attacking ability to discard a card from your hand to choose that card and to bring it to active. So another deck that we have in the blue color is the Mustang Blue deck. So the main card of the deck is of course Roy Mustang himself, that says Raid. If you have no cards in your hand, this character gains impact 1. It also says when played, draw a card. So this is a 5-cost 1 action point card that says Raid. If you have no cards in your hand, this character gains impact 1. It also says when played, draw a card. And when attacking, place any number of cards from your hand into your sideline. Choose up to 1 character with 1000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. For each card placed from your hand into your sideline with this ability, add 1000 to the BP range of the character you may choose with this ability. If you sideline a character with this ability, you may also place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. If you do, that character is placed into the removal area instead. So of course, this card has a lot of text. We'll really break it down. So you would resolve the effect in this order. You would place any number of cards from your hand into your sideline. You can actually choose 0 cards if you want. And you can choose 1 character with BP within the range you can choose on your opponent's front line. The BP range of the character you can choose increases according to the number of cards you've placed into your sideline in step 1. If a character chosen would end up sideline, you now decide if you will place a card from your hand into your sideline in addition. If you do not place a card from your hand into your sideline in step 3, sideline the opponent's character you choose. If you did place a card from your hand into your sideline in step 3, place the opponent's character you chose into the removal area. So basically, if you want to sideline an opposing character with 4000 BP, you would have to discard 3 cards. And if you want to remove the card instead, you would discard 4 cards. And notably, if you choose to remove the card, the when sideline ability of the card that you are removing will not trigger. The next card is the 4-cost 1 action point Riza Hawkeye that says when played, choose up to 1 character with 1500 or more BP on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, place 1 of them on the top of your deck, then place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. Also activate main if on the front line. Once per turn, choose up to 1 character with 1500 or more BP on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn, and this card has 4000 BP. So to break it down, on the turn played, you can minus 2000 BP on 1 character with 2500 BP or more, or you can minus 1000 BP off of 2 characters with 1500 BP or more. So the overall goal of this deck is to soften up opposing characters to use the when attacking ability of the Raid Roy Mustang, because if you look at the following cards, so for example this 2-cost 1 action point Roy Mustang, it says when played, choose up to 1 character with 1500 or more BP on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So if you remember, also the effect of Riza Hawkeye also has conditions on which her effect can activate. So basically both of these cards cannot sideline cards on their own. You really have to use the Roy Mustang to be able to knock out cards after they've been softened up by these 2 cards. Another card that's fairly interesting is the 4-cost 1 action point Roy Mustang that says during your turn, if you have 2 or less cards in your hand, this character gains 1000 BP. So it brings it up from 4000 BP to 5000. It also says when attacking, if you have no cards in your hand, draw up to 1 card. So basically, if you have this and the Raid Mustang, you want to use the Raid Mustang first to discard cards, and then you can use this card to attack to draw cards during your battle step. Another card that allows you to get cards back after having an empty hand is the 3-cost 1 action point Maze Hughes. That says activate main, place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. Once per turn, this character gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. And it also says when sideline, if you have 2 or less cards in your hand, draw a card. So this is the main color trigger of the deck. And important is that it also generates 2 energies. A great card to have in the back line that when needed, you can always put it into the front line. Another card that allows you to draw cards is the 2-cost 1 action point, the military is in trouble. This allows you to draw 2 cards. Then if you only have 2 cards in your hand, draw 1 additional card. So effectively, if you have an empty hand, this allows you to draw 3 cards. So one interesting card that I would recommend playing in this deck is the 4-cost 1 action point Edward. That is a non-raid card that says when played, you may add 1 card from your life area to your hand. If you do, switch this character to active. So a fairly aggressive card, but you also get a card to your hand, which will help you in situations where you would have discarded cards to activate your Roy Mustang. It also says activate main, place 2 cards from your hand into the sideline. Once per turn, this character gains impact until the end of the turn. And of course, don't forget the ruling that when you add a card using this ability from your life, you do not perform a trigger check. So the first deck of the purple color is the human purple deck, and we'll be looking at the key cards of this deck. So the first card we'll be looking at in this deck is the 6-cost 1 action point King Bradley, which is a homunculus and human card. And this is a beast of a card because it says raid. When played, this character gains 500 BP, going from 4500 BP to 5000, and double attack until the end of the turn. Also activate main, if on the front line once per turn, choose 1 character on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So definitely a very strong card. It is rare that we see a card with only 6 costs have more than 4000 BP. And this card has 4500. And notably, the 3-cost King Bradley allows you to protect the raid card if you use them separately, because the 3-cost King Bradley says when played, choose up to 1 other character on your front line. It gains this character cannot be chosen by your opponent's trigger abilities until the end of the turn. So notably, any card that has double attack is more prone to getting hit by trigger abilities just by function of attacking 2 shields. So you might want to play this card to be able to protect the 6-cost 1 action point King Bradley and not be hit by a special trigger. Another key card of the deck is the 5-cost Kimberly that says raid. When played, choose up to 1 character with 3000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. Also activate main, once per turn, place 1 Philosopher's Stone card from your sideline into your removal area. If you do, this character gains impact 1. If you do, this character gains impact 1 until the end of the turn. So of course, there will be cards that synergize with this ability, namely the non-raid Kimberly that is 2-cost 1 action point. That says when played, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So of course, there's 2-cost combo where you play the 2-cost Kimberly first, and then you raid on top of it with the 5-cost Kimberly. Effectively allows you to sideline an opposing character with 4000 BP. But you can also use the King Bradley if it's already on the field. You can use basically at no cost the activate main card that allows you to soften up an opposing card by 1000 BP, and then you can use the 5-cost Kimberly to knock it out with its when played ability. So we'll be looking at specifically the cards that allow you to use Kimberly to its max potential. So the Philosopher's Stone is the AP restand card of the deck. So basically the 3 action point card over here. And we also have other cards in the deck that synergize well with your AP restand card or the Philosopher's Stone, or the final trigger is the 3-cost Kimberly that says when played, you may place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. If you do, draw a card. If the card placed into your sideline with this ability is Philosopher's Stone, you draw 2 cards instead. So for example, if you don't need tempo and you really just need card advantage, you can use the 3-cost Kimberly to turn your Philosopher's Stone into 2 cards. Another very strong card in this deck is the 3-cost 1 action point Pride, which is a homunculus. This is the color trigger of the deck, and it starts off with 3000 BP and provides a great 2 energy. And this card says activate main once per turn, sideline 1 Kimberly or 1 character with 4 or more required energy on your field. If you do, draw a card. Super good. And give this character 2000 BP, bring it up to 5000 BP, and impact 1 until the end of the turn. So this is a very powerful card that you would keep in your back row and push up as needed if you're trying to end the game with its 5000 BP and impact 1. And you can sideline, for example, a newly played Kimberly that is rested on your field, or any other 4 or more energy card. The last deck we'll be looking at is the Father Purple deck. So this is a very interesting deck because the main core strategy is to play powerful cards after setting up your sideline using mill strategies. So the payoff of this deck is the 4-cost 2 action point Father, who is a homunculus. And this card says, this card can only be played if you have 20 or more cards in your sideline, and there are no cards on your field with the same card number as this card. So effectively you can play this card onto the field if there are other Father cards on your field, just not this exact card. And you play this character set active onto your field, and this also inherently has double attack. So this means that this has double attack every turn, not just a turn is played. And it also says when played, choose up to 1 character in your opponent's front line and sideline it. Also activate main. if in the sideline, you can only activate this ability if you have 20 or more cards in your sideline. Place 3 purple cards from your hand into your sideline. If you do, add this card from your sideline to your hand. If you milled all the father cards into your sideline, you can still bring them back just by discarding 3 purple cards. So this is definitely a very strong, powerful late game strategy that will likely win you the game if you have the setup done. So another powerful card that allows you to set up for father is the 4-cost 1 action point Lust, who is a homunculus that is a raid card that says when play, draw 2 cards, then place 2 cards from your hand into your sideline. Then if you have 10 or more cards in your sideline, draw an additional card. Also, when sideline, return up to 1 base card of this rated card to your hand. So it's a very neat card that allows you to recycle the base card of yourself and really sets up your sideline to allow you to play father in the late game. And this character has also 4000 BP. Another card that is fairly strong in this deck is the 4-cost 1 action point Envy, who is a homunculus, and this is a raid card that says when played, this character gains impact until the end of the turn. Also, when attacking, draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline, which is great for setting up father. And also when sideline, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. So definitely this is a great utility card that can still put pressure on your opponent. So for this specific deck, we'll be looking at the special trigger, which is the 4-cost 1 action point I'll be taking yours, because it's a little bit different than most specials just because it says choose 1 character with 3000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. If you have 4 or more homunculus affinity cards on your field, choose one of the following: 5000 or less BP, or place the top 2 cards of your deck into your sideline. So effectively, if your opponent only has a 3000 or less BP card and you have 4 homunculus, you can choose to sideline their card and also mill 2 cards to get you further into your strategy. And the next card is the 2-cost 1 action point Homunculi that says place the top 2 cards of your deck into your sideline, then add up to 1 purple card with homunculus affinity from your sideline to your hand. So this is a great utility card that allows you to mill cards while still providing you a toolbox ability that allows you to bring back a card that you want from your sideline. And next, we'll be looking at a very important card, which is the 1-cost 1 action point Countrywide Transmutation Circle. And this simply says activate main, switch to resting once per turn, place the top card of your deck into your sideline. Then if you have 20 or more cards in your sideline, draw a card. So if you have 20 or more cards in your sideline, you both mill a card and draw a card after. And this is a very important card because it's not a hard once per turn. So basically if you have 1 or 2 or even 3, you can be milling a lot of cards every turn. So a very important but also sad card of this deck is the 0-cost 1 action point Nina and Alexander, who is notably a human. And this card says activate main, switch to resting once per turn. This character gains 1 energy generation, and at the end of the main phase, sideline this character until the end of the turn. So effectively when you use it, it goes to resting and it goes to 2 energy generation, and it should sideline itself, this card, unless you raid it, for example, with the 2-cost 1 action point Nina and Alexander card that says when played, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, place any number of them onto the top of your deck in any order, then place any remaining cards into your sideline. Then if this character is raided, draw a card. So effectively you can just mill 2 cards and draw a card after, if you don't need the 2 cards that you saw. And notably, if this card is raided, it gains 2 energy. So effectively, you are raiding on top of the base card, you lose no energy, and you set up your sideline for your future strategies. And other utility cards of this deck are the 3-cost 1 action point Lust that says when play, look at the top card of your deck. If that card has homunculus affinity, you may reveal it and add it to your hand. Otherwise, place it onto the top of your deck or into your sideline. So usually you should use the ability to sideline a card because it sets your sideline up by adding 1 more card. And this is a color trigger with 2500 BP and 2 energy generation. And we also have our 2-cost 1 action point Envy that says your character cards with raid can perform raid on this character. So it gives you a lot of options in the mid game. And it also says when played, if you have 10 or more cards in your sideline, choose up to 1 character with 3000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. So a great utility card that allows you to do some nifty tricks and push for some extra damage. So if I were to do a deck ranking, and of course this is a big guess given that these cards have not come out yet, is that I would put as the first deck the purple homunculus deck or the father deck as number 1, just because even though the late game is very strong, I also think the mid game with all the raid cards like Envy and Lust allow you to still put pressure on your opponent to win even if you can't get the father online in time. The next deck would be the Yellow Brothers deck, which I find is pretty decent. It's just that it needs a lot of setup given that you have a lot of 3-card combos. I would consider it very similar to the Yellow Bambi's deck from Bleach Volume 2 in that you're able to constantly use your sideline as a toolbox by reanimating or reviving cards from your sideline to the field. So definitely a very strong strategy. It's just that it requires some setup and that reduces the consistency overall of the deck. The next deck would be the Purple Humans deck, which is a very strong deck on its own. It may be very similar in power to the Yellow Brothers deck. And next we have the 4-cost Blue Mustang deck, which is also a very good deck. It's just that sometimes the stars will not align, meaning that when you discard cards to be able to fuel your Roy Mustang's ability, you will not be able to draw cards that will allow you to refill your hand in time and gain back the card advantage you lost. And after that we have the Blue Briggs deck, which I find is a fairly fun deck all in all. well. It's just that 2 action point decks can be a bit janky if the proper cards do not align well. And lastly, we have the yellow Xing deck, which is a very strong deck once you're able to hit the 7 energy. It's just that it's very rare that you're able to maintain that energy. So basically, if you're not hitting the right cards, you will be put pretty much at a great disadvantage. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more videos.